much embryonic, just growing and kind of gestating organization, the Artists' Assembly Against Austerity, which I've kind of initiated or set into motion, but the intention is for it to be a really grassroots, ground-up organization that is kind of as democratic as it could possibly be. I'm Susan Butler, and I kind of came into left-wing radical politics, I think through being from the US and therefore having injustice and really nastiness at being a real part of my cultural heritage. Also having a sense that as an immigrant with resident status but not citizenship status, I don't vote in the UK, or I kind of can't vote in the UK. And that's given me a real sense of kind of when politics happens and how politics happens, and how a lot of people leave their politics to election day. But that's not actually when a lot of underhanded, sneaky, slidey things like the TTIP, a lot of the privatization stuff that's going on, the bedroom tax. Nobody went to a poll and voted for that. These things all happen between elections and behind closed doors, hoping that we would notice, and kind of hoping that we're happy enough to turn up on election day and kind of choose the least worst option. But that's not the only thing that we can do as citizens and as people who are sort of interested in social justice. So, the Artists' Assembly Against Austerity has recently launched with an open letter in The Guardian, and it is a subgroup of the People's Assembly Against Austerity. And some of you will already know about this, some of you are already involved in it. The idea of the People's Assembly is that, especially starting in kind of 2008 with the big economic crisis, but then with the establishment, I don't want to say election of, but the rise of the Condem government and the imposition of austerity measures, a number of kind of single issue or local anti-cuts groups popped up to resist what was going on, and that's fantastic. And so there are these hundreds and hundreds of groups all over the country fighting to save their libraries, fighting to save their A&E, fighting to save their maternity unit. So the People's Assembly came up to be a kind of umbrella organization and a sort of solidarity and facilitation organization to bring these single issue and local groups together into a large groundswell organization to create a really loud and present, effective opposition to the government's austerity measures, which are, as you guys know, really decimating thousands of lives and trying to get us used to a really undignified quality of life by making us all think that it's our fault. Austerity is one of these things that encourages all sorts of other sort of residual, disgusting social diseases, like racism and xenophobia. We're encouraged to look at our neighbors who look a little bit different from us or have a different accent from us and think it's their fault that we haven't got any money or that we don't have any jobs, when actually what we should be saying is no one should be allowed to make a profit and get rich by paying their staff poverty wages. You know, sort of, so we shouldn't be, looking at our new arrivals and hating them for really what's happening up above. And so these sorts of methods that are used to fracture society need to be countered by movements that try to really actually bring us together as a working class. And so while some people are being radicalized into action and going into organizations like UKIP, we're hoping to provide an actually sort of sane and positive and productive opposition. So the People's Assembly has been going on since last year. its first meeting packed out Westminster Central Hall, which was amazing. It was a really inspiring day. Thousands of people, I think it was kind of 4,000 or 5,000 people in Westminster Central Hall for its very first meeting. At this point, there are, I think, 76 local People's Assembly organizations all over the country. And then there are 2 sort of national but themed People's Assembly groups. So there's the Women's Assembly Against Austerity and the Students' Assembly Against Austerity. And so we all have the same aims, and the themed groups have a kind of specific demographic focus. So while this was all going on, I noticed that not a lot of my colleagues and friends who are involved in the arts and the creative sector were on the streets or involved in organizations and really mobilized. Even though they absolutely would tear shit apart if we lost the NHS. They're all suffering from rocketing rents. So everybody's kind of quality of life is deteriorating, and and everyone sort of understands why. But I noticed that my artist friends were the least mobilized among the people that I knew. And there are a lot of reasons for this. My own kind of theory is that a lot of artists just kind of aren't joiners. It's sort of hippie and not really that interesting to think, sort of I can hit the streets and change things. A lot of artists feel like political action on the part of artists means a very self-interested sort of thing where, sort of as artists we're trying to save the Arts Council, or we want more Arts Council funding for me so I can paint my ass blue in front of my 6 friends. But that doesn't really have anything to do with the wider community. And so I'm actually not going to go out in public and say that I want this very selfish thing just for me and my 6 friends. Let's see, but I think there's also the issue of artists not necessarily having the same traditional entry points to grassroots politics. A lot of people get involved with politics through their trade unions and their workplaces, and we don't necessarily have those traditional entry points. So I wanted to use the idea of the People's Assembly because the People's Assembly sort of isn't a trade union, and it isn't necessarily tied to one locality or a single issue. Anybody can join, you don't have to already have an affiliation. And so I thought that this could be a really productive place where artists, and I use artists in the broadest possible way, people, sort of who paint paintings or dance or are musicians or are technicians, people who are administrators, educators, broadcasters, editors, and audiences, people who are just kind of interested in having an artistic sector, have all kind of come together and are looking to support what is now going to be, I think, a really sort of dynamic and cool subgroup of the People's Assembly. So this is the original open letter. And I like the phrasing of demand the alternative. Which comes from the People's Assembly. It reminds me of Frederick Douglass, who was a freed slave in the United States, who gave us the very useful phrase, "Power concedes nothing without demand." There's just no sense in which it's enough that we know that injustices are taking place. We have to force them to stop it. We have to make them change. And that means taking action and getting on the streets. So, I just want to kind of check out the 4 original key demands of the Artists' Assembly. Healthcare for the point of need is a human right, but especially for artists, if we move to an American-style system where if you are lucky enough to have a kind of upper middle class sort of professional full-time job, you may be able to get private health cover through your employer, although that fucks people over all the time. Sort of even really professional members of the bourgeoisie. A lot of artists don't have these kinds of jobs and don't want them. It's not necessarily relevant. And so it's, so moving to this system, this sort of weird quagmire of part privatized and part public, is not just incredibly inefficient, poor quality healthcare. It's expensive, and it leaves a lot of people without coverage. So not just artists, but I think artists in particular have a lot to lose in terms of the NHS, and we really need to be out there fighting for it. Education. So many of us have finished, and we're not going to set foot in our educational institutions. Most of the artists I know use teaching to some extent, either within higher education, within schools, or running workshops to supplement their practice. And with the massive cuts to the HE sector, we're seeing a loss of a lot of those jobs. We're seeing the amount of admin and work that you have to do to keep those jobs going up and up and up, kind of cutting out the time you have for your artistic practice. And then on the other side, on the student experience side, I'm really worried about a possible gentrification of the cultural sector. Art, writing, music, the sort of cultural artifacts that we produce are the artifacts of our age. And if in a generation, the only people who have access to artistic production are those with independent financial means, it's going to create a pretty distorted picture of what our times are actually like. Which isn't to say that you can't create art with no money, or that, you know, sort of artists never come from poor backgrounds. But it's hard. It's harder. It will close the door to a lot of people. And I've seen kids in the US who don't even bother to imagine what it might be like to be an artist, because everybody tells them, you know, sort of, well, yeah, but what are you going to do if you chip a tooth? So that kind of crushing of possibility is something that Marx would disapprove of, in my opinion. We all need affordable homes and studios. Well, we all need affordable homes. Those of us who need studios need them to be affordable. And it's felonious, the extent to which people are allowed to charge what they like because it's a free market. That's unacceptable. And then arts investment, and I don't like to call it arts funding, because we can argue all day long about the non-material value of having lots and lots of artists and artistic production and democratization of access to publishing and art production. But some people will go, well, that's not relevant to me, because I don't go see art, I hate artists, you know, why go get a job and do your hobby in your spare time. However, we know that art is good for the economy. For every pound invested in art and artists, 6 pounds goes into the local economy. So whether you're an artist, an art lover, or an art hater, art is good for you. And as I was kind of saying at the beginning, we can't wait for the next election. First of all, Labour is a pretty flabby and flaccid opposition. But also, privatization is difficult to reverse. When we sell a hospital to, what's his face, Virgin guy, Richard Branson, if suddenly, you know, sort of we decide to change the way we do things and stop privatization there, he's not just going to happily give it back. We can't let our public services get sold out from under us in the hopes that, you know, sort of maybe Miliband will do something about it later. He won't, and he can't. The following 613 people agreed with me, and so there they are. I'm just going to keep scrolling down for dramatic effect. Yay! And if you would like to, sorry? Yeah. And if you want to see your name too, you can email Okay?
You put your name in capital letters, so then you stand out on the list.
Well, I mean, okay, so here's I know!
Either an ego or a stock 50.
The thing about that was that, like, sort of as I'm popping the names up there, which really actually the Guardian wanted me to do in order to publish the open letter, I know that some people like to have their name all in lowercase, and some people feel that their name is only spelled correctly if it's like a strike through or whatever. So I was just trying to keep exactly the formatting that people had entered on the form, instead of assuming that people want sort of first letter uppercase and everything, you know. So so I just kept everything like that, but hopefully, yeah. So spell your name right, or else because that's what it's going to look like.
You've actually got a great history over there.
Yeah. So she's been a fantastic supporter. Dave Randall from Faithless is really supportive and fantastic, and he's got a book that's going to be coming out about music and activism. I think it's going to be called A People's History of Music. I heard him give a really inspiring talk about it, and so look out for that. Okay, cool. Yeah, there you go. So this is what we're working with, and I'm just kind of going straight through. I didn't talk about those things, but that's not important. Those are the basic important things about the Artists' Assembly. Besides, the other really important thing about it is that we're going to be holding our first meeting at the Unite Union headquarters in London, unfortunately, on the 12th of October, which is a Sunday. Now, for those of us who kind of can't come down to London, or whatever, we're also going to live stream the event. So we'll have a facility through the live stream for people to be able to contribute by the chat function, because I was really reluctant to hold, especially the first meeting in London, because I don't want it to feel like a London-centric group, and also, sort of the city of London is the place whence a lot of these problems come. But it was a necessary evil this time, unfortunately. But I will also be forwarding a motion that everybody will get to vote on to see where we want to hold the next meeting. And I'm going to be pushing hard that it will be somewhere in the north rather than somewhere in the southeast. Also, if you want the information about how to link up with that and the details about the meeting, then that's the email address, and I'll be on the other end.
So what do you hope to practically achieve with having amassed all these people together who all feel the same?
That's a really good question. I can tell you what my personal hopes are, rather than speaking for the group, because really what I feel like I saw a need or an opportunity to mobilize people who weren't necessarily mobilized. But I didn't want to have too much of a personal vision for the group, because then, well, I mean, A, it just wouldn't work, and B, who am I? I'm just one person.
Like your summer assembly.
Yeah, indeed. So so what I really want to see is a fantastic democratic open process that starts at the first meeting, whereby people say, we want to do, we want to have direct action. So the specific shape that it should take, I would like to be absolutely dictated by consensus and by the members. It seems like a good idea to have some kind of centralized resource base, a kind of online platform for that sort of thing. And that we are taking advantage of all of the different ways in which we can be active. I mean, one of my questions really is, how are we going to use the group to affect parliamentary politics, particularly as a kind of radical organization who thinks that the system is sort of fucked. So as we're trying to dismantle the system, how do we affect change within it? And how do we sort of reconcile a kind of need to reform what's in place with a desire to get rid of what's in place? So I've got questions and not answers. And I hope that the folk who come together will be able to use each other's energy and ideas to start to work through some of those answers.
But I think it'd be great to kind of like arrange exhibitions and events that participants create themselves, and then because I think as Nicola was saying earlier, like Nicole, sorry, that reaching the people that aren't already activated, that's the kind of biggest challenge. I think to kind of like reach out. So all these artists have audiences that already see their work, but like how do you kind of like up them from just being passive absorbers of art to being radicalised into action by what they see?
Well, I mean, I think one thing that people have asked me, I mean, there have been a few journalists involved or sort of interested, and I keep getting this question of, oh great, so you're gonna like do like performances on demonstrations, or or everybody's gonna start making artwork that's about austerity, and I don't think so. I mean, like, I'm probably not going to start making artwork that's necessarily about austerity. I don't think that we can kind of tell folk what to make artwork about. And it's kind of more of a union and more of a space where we can see that our interests as artists link up with the interests of society as a whole.
I guess one thing you could consider is like places that are threatened with closure, for example, libraries or wards, wings, other sort of public spaces that are being privatised or sold off or taken over. Those could be potential gallery spaces or performance spaces that you could work with the people who are about to, like the Barnet Library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm thinking as well of there's a fantastic group. They're my kind of current activism heroes at the moment, the Focus E15 Mothers, a group of, a lot of them are quite young mums who were in a hostel called Focus E15 in the Docklands in London. And there's a huge social cleansing agenda that's going on there at the moment, and people are getting bounced out of social housing and told that now their housing benefits won't cover rent in London, but we can rehouse you in Southampton or Birmingham or Hull. Meanwhile, sort of a 17-year-old homeless mother is being thrown out of her accommodation with a 3-week-old baby, and now she doesn't necessarily have her mum and her friends and her family and her support network around her. And so the question there is, this is all being done in the name of stopping people being reliant on benefits. And it's like, but sort of you take her away from her support network, now she's going to be reliant on benefits, until the year dot, because she can't go to her friend that she knows well and say, can you for free look after my kid while I go to college? So, yeah, I got off on a little bit of a digression there because I love them so much. But they've recently liberated some disused spaces and are occupying them around the kind of Stratford and East London area. So that would be a really great opportunity for the Artists' Assembly to link up and get some people in there, sort of drawing more attention to the issue and kind of getting audiences into these activist spaces. And I think that audiences are already so great. I'm really pleased at how many of these people aren't necessarily art practitioners, but have identified as audience members, because they're the last and kind of most key part in the artistic production thing. Sort of if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, did it fall? Well, they're the ones that are there to hear it, and so they make the communication process complete. So I think, yeah, having audiences on board has been really encouraging and inspiring. But I mean, I've also brought along with me some examples of some of the work by Artist Assembly supporters that kind of really does qualify as activist artwork. So I can show you some stuff if we've got time. I mean, Peter Kennard, who's involved with this exhibition, well, I should say Kennard Phillips, his collaboration with Captain Phillips. Let's get him back. Let's get him back in a second. Yeah. A lot of you will already be quite familiar with their work. You know, I think that this is probably the most famous image from the Kennard Phillips repertoire, the flare selfie. But they also did a really fantastic kind of live art piece called the Cafe Equivalents. And so they set up in Leadenhall Market, right near the Square Mile of the City of London. And they were trying to bring attention to the fact that in much of the developing world, people have to pay sometimes up to 80% of their income on food. And so they were selling soup to city workers. And so this is a kind of market where, you know, sort of people might go and pick up, you know, sort of some street food at lunchtime. And they were encouraging these city workers to buy a little thimble full of soup for like 90 quid, because that was the kind of equivalent that a sort of proportion of their income that they might have to pay for that amount of food if they were somewhere like Mozambique, certain parts of Central America, etc. So this was a live intervention where, okay, so this is difficult to read there, but it says, Kitty de Coq picks fruit for Tesco and is paid 1,231 grand, or £97.90 a month, by a company that makes $3 billion profit annually. She spends more than 70% of her income on food. How much should you pay? So this is Kat trying to sell piddly amounts of very expensive soup. And of course, I mean, they didn't sell any, because none of us would stand for that. We're Westerners, we want to be treated fairly. And this is a publicly funded art piece that was funded through Arts Admin in June of 2009. Figures here. A little bit of, you know, that little cup of soup and bread in their stall costs £111.20. They didn't have any takers. Another artist whose work I really admire is Ori Ashray. PowerPoint doesn't like me at the moment, and so when I try to make the slides full screen, it closes. So we're gonna do it like this in a transparent way, so you get to kind of see behind the wonderful Wizard of Oz's thing. Ori Ashray is she's a queer Israeli performance artist who's lived in the UK for, I think, 19 or 21 years now. And she engages quite actively in pro-Palestine politics. And also a kind of more general question of identity politics. She does this a lot of the time through an alter ego called Max Fisher. Max Fisher is a Hasidic Jew, and she calls her performance practice that she does as Max Fisher gender terrorism, where she uses this sort of kind of religion drag. I mean, Orit is Jewish herself, but not Hasidic. She uses religion drag to access a lot of male-only spaces. So a couple more images of Orit as Max. Now, one of the men-only spaces that she infiltrated and in a way kind of desecrated, in that sense, was in a performance called Dancing with Men. There's an annual religious festival that memorializes Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is he was an author of a kind of major Kabbalistic text. And so it's this 3-day festival, and it's men only, and they go and kind of dance ecstatically for 3 days. And as far as we know, she's the only woman who's made it in there, and so we can just check out a very short clip from Dancing with Men, I think.
So her performance was that she went to this event dressed as a man?
Yeah. Which was an incredibly dangerous thing to do.
How like the life of Brian? Oh no, the Monty Python Holy Grail.
No, it's like
Yeah. It's like, oh.
I'm sorry, I lack the cultural frame of reference for that. It's hard to be an immigrant
a lot of
sometimes.
women who put on beards so they could go to Stone.
Oh, okay, great. That sounds amazing. Hey guys, hey, how are you? Okay, you know what? I'm gonna leave that one, but you can imagine what it must have been like. Another artist whose live artwork I think is absolutely astounding. Oh, sorry, I just want to give funding props there real quick. Wafa Bilal. Wafa Bilal is an Iraqi artist who is currently working in the US. And his backstory is that his father and brother were both killed in drone strikes in Iraq. And he's one of the lucky few who was able to sort of get out and find a place elsewhere. And he makes a lot of artwork that draws attention to the kind of disposable lives of people in Iraq. Wafa has a piece called Shoot an Iraqi that was part of his kind of domestic tension series. And in Shoot an Iraqi, Bilal put himself into, or kind of installed himself in a gallery space in Chicago. It was the same size dimensions as a Guantanamo prison cell. And so he had a paintball gun pointed at him, which anyone could log onto the internet and control remotely and shoot him. There was also a kind of constant live stream of it. So if you were logged in, you could watch yourself shooting him. You can watch other people shooting him, watch him getting shot. So I do believe I have a quick clip of day 14 of domestic tension.
Okay, everybody, it's day 14. This has been insane because what happened is news hit Deep.com and the place has been completely bombarded non-stop for the last 2-3 hours, and you could see it's absolutely trapped so much. I mean, to the point you cannot notice. I think it just these people come and are so disturbing, and I don't know why this much hate they have in them. And you could see absolutely non-stop. And this is not a single action. This is a lot of people actions.
So he has to keep refill. I mean, on this day, he had to sort of keep refilling the paintballs because there was, someone who was just really having a good time with it. Now, one of the interesting things about domestic tension is that you were able to shoot an Iraqi, but you could also not shoot an Iraqi. If enough people got on and directed the gun in a certain direction, or all in the same direction at once, they could block other people trying to move it to kind of follow Wafa around. And so people were able to organize to all go in at the same time, or to all kind of log on at the same time to steer the gun away from him so he could do things like sleep for a little bit, eat something. So I think this was a really moving piece of artwork that kind of brought the implications of remote warfare sort of into the public sphere. And the implication of paintballs is that, I mean, they're non-lethal, but they do hurt. And they are loud and intrusive, and so to someone being in that space, undergoing that for 30 days, you know, I mean, it is a kind of torture. But also, you can see the difference between the beautiful, pristine, white gallery space that it started with and the absolute fucking mess that it was at the end. So that notion of making things visible is something that we also see in his piece And Counting. So here, this was a kind of a tattooing piece. Oh, that happened. Okay. So Bilal kind of created a borderless map of Iraq on his back. So you can see where the major cities are written in Farsi on this map. And over the course of 24 hours, he was live tattooed with individual dots. The red dots that you can see represent each American killed in Iraq. The ones, and so those are the fatalities that my friends and family, for example, are very much sort of encouraged to be aware of and to sort of honor and commemorate. But using infrared ink, oh, you can't really see that very well here. Okay. I do encourage you to check this out. But the infrared ink is represents 5,000 Iraqi deaths. I mean, the idea at first was to you know, have parity, have, you know, sort of one red dot for an American death and one infrared dot for a UV light dot for Iraqi deaths. But there were too many. You couldn't actually kind of safely tattoo someone with that many dots. And so they had to kind of condense them down in this way. And it's a symbol of the ways in which, you know, sort of, if you look at it from a certain, or only when you look at it from a certain light, are these losses actually visible to most people. So I wonder if we want to. Okay, I'll finish, I think, with one of my favorites, Catherine Araniello. Catherine Araniello is a British performance artist. Actually, I'm just gonna show these things and not set it up too much. So I'll show you a bit of this. I wonder if you. This isn't her work, by the way. This was a. What? Okay, wait. I'm good at that. This is really gonna happen. This was on Channel 4 in 2012 when the Olympic thing happened.
Jagger not sagging, spell it backwards, I'ma leave it at that. That ain't got nothing to do with rap. Get up, this like that. Get up, this like that. Get up, this like that. Get up, this gangster 20 years later. Of course, endures while consciousness faded. New generations believe in them fables. Gangsta boogie on 2 turntables. Thank you for letting us be ourselves. So don't mind me if I repeat myself. These simple lines be good for your health. To keep them time rhymes on the shelf. Live love life like you just don't care. Never scared. Rain and noise is the moment they feared. Get up, still a beautiful idea.
Okay, so in a way this commercial is kind of cool, right? I mean, it disrupts the kind of monotony of body normativity that we get in television in general and around sports and athletics in particular. This idea of what the athletic body is, of what kinds of bodies are able to sort of perform and achieve. What it also did was to put a very kind of strong and heroic and glamorous face on the Paralympics at the same time as Atos, one of its biggest sponsors, was literally ruining the lives of thousands of disabled people by certifying people fit to work who just simply weren't, and there have been fatalities. And so while this sort of intervention may have its place, Catherine's response to it, I think, also deserves an airing.
Jagging, not sagging. Spell it backwards, I'ma leave it at that. That ain't got nothing to do with rap. Get up, just like that. Get up, just like that. Get up, just like that. Get up, just like that.
I know this is a shock.
Screaming gangster 20 years later. Of course, endures while consciousness faded. New generations believe in them fables. Gangsta boogie on 2 turntables. Thank you for letting us be ourselves. So don't mind me if I repeat myself. These simple lines be good for your health. To keep them time rhymes on the shelf. Live love life like you just don't care. Never scared. Rain and noise is the moment they feared. Get up, still a beautiful idea.
So, for a profoundly disabled person who isn't going to be close to a normative body ideal, who isn't going to be, you know, sort of just like a normal athlete with a difference, you know, who can't lift much more than a cotton bud, and who can't eat and drink something unaided. This was to bring attention to everyone else. The people who are not fit for work, and who need carers who are paid a decent wage, so that they can provide decent care. Those sorts of things. And so I think that these are a few examples of the ways in which performance in particular, and art in general, can provide these very sort of specific and embodied responses to social issues. I think that there is kind of consciousness raising and calls to action that can happen through artwork, and then there's the actual boots on the ground, banging pots and pans, demanding and coercing power into change. And so that's what I hope the Artists' Assembly will be all about. So let's talk more. Let's talk about it. Yeah.
issues, and that's something that we struggle with here. Obviously, that change, concrete, change with longevity.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's been any thoughts, strategy with regards to how the arts assembly could start to kind of form ideas for that.
Well, I mean, in my opinion, I totally agree with you that sort of we can draw attention to issues. I mean, I was talking about this at a conference of writers vis-a-vis climate change, and I was trying to make the point that we don't have to win the argument anymore. There's a consensus, and I think most people agree. It's now, what do we do about it? And I'm not sure that writing stories about climate change is what we do about it. I think that, and so indeed, while political artwork is as likely as any other artwork to be effective and beautiful and to move your soul, we also need to be human beings with our arms linked around somebody's house to prevent them from getting evicted. Because we as human beings say no. We don't care that they have a spare room for their kid to stay in when their kid visits at the weekend. You're not kicking that person out. I think that it's not necessarily as artists, but as people, that we need to sort of actively be there to say, we're not going to allow this, and it's not enough to simply disagree. I'm looking forward to the first meeting, because I mean, at the moment, right now, it's kind of just me, and so I'm like, hell no, I won't go. But getting all of those people together is where somebody's going to go, okay, on Wednesday this is happening, who's with me?
Yeah, great.
That's what I hope.
Yeah. But it's great, it's just a starting point enough. There's not have to have all the answers.
Yeah. So I think the answer to your question is kind of what we will do is bring those questions. Okay, great. Thanks everybody.